The Skin Instructor's tip of the week. When we think about pigment, most of us jump straight to skin tone or dark spots, but pigment is so much more than that. Melanin is your skin's built in armor. It helps absorb harmful UV radiation, reduce DNA damage, and neutralize free radicals. That means pigmentation isn't just cosmetic, it's a part of your body's immune response to environmental stressors. So, how do we support that function in the treatment room or at home? We look at antioxidant rich products. Think vitamin C, niacinamide, resveratrol that protect melanocytes from oxidative stress. These ingredients won't just brighten the skin, they help stabilize and support your client's pigmentation system from the inside out. Remember, it's not about stripping pigment, it's about balancing and protecting it.
Welcome back to the Skin Instructors. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Jolie. We're your go to aesthetic educators here to simplify skin science and help you level up in the treatment room. All right, let's start with the foundation pigmentation. July is National Hyperpigmentation and Melasma Awareness Month. It's easy to assume that skin color is a simple spectrum, but the biology behind it is incredibly layered.
Exactly. And that's why this month we are going to spend every single week talking about pigmentation. When we talk about pigmentation, we're mainly referring to melanin, the pigment produced by specialized cells in the skin called melanocytes. These cells live at the base of the epidermis and are responsible for producing two types of melanin: eumelanin, which gives brown to black tones, and pheomelanin, which contributes to red and yellow tones.
And get this, everyone has roughly the same number of melanocytes, no matter what their skin color is. The difference lies in how much melanin these melanocytes produce, what type of melanin they make, and how that melanin is packaged and distributed to surrounding skin cells.
Right, eumelanin is denser and offers greater protection against UV radiation. It acts almost like a built-in sunscreen. Pheomelanin, on the other hand, is less effective at filtering UV and is even associated with higher oxidative stress and DNA damage when exposed to sunlight. In fact, studies even show that pheomelanin can actually promote oxidative stress and photo damage, highlighting why red-haired or fair-skinned individuals are at a greater risk of sun-induced skin cancers.
So, pigmentation is more than skin deep. It's a functional system. It's influenced by over 170 genes, environmental triggers, hormones, inflammation, and even vascular and fibroblast activity in the skin.
And that's why pigmentary disorders like melasma, post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation, and vitiligo aren't just cosmetic concerns. They're complex conditions that impact self-esteem, identity, and quality of life. In a 2023 global study, 50% of participants reported having at least one pigmentary disorder, and for many, it had a moderate to severe impact on daily life.
Which means, as estheticians and skincare pros, we're not just treating what we see, we're working with a highly responsive system that reflects deeper biological processes.
And when we understand the science behind it, we can educate our clients, choose the right ingredients, and make a real difference, not just on the surface, but cellularly.
So now that we know melanin is the star of the show, let's dig into how it actually gets made. The process is called melanogenesis, and it's not just a switch that flips on and off. It's a carefully orchestrated biochemical dance that happens inside organelles called melanosomes within the melanocytes.
Exactly. And inside those melanosomes, the amino acid tyrosine is converted into melanin through a series of steps. The key enzyme that kicks off this is tyrosinase, and without it, melanin production basically stalls out.
And it's not alone. Tyrosinase is supported by two other enzymes, TYRP1 and DCT, which helps shape whether eumelanin or pheomelanin is produced. These enzymes are regulated by a master transcription factor called MITF. That's the microphthalmia associated transcription factor. It's like the conductor of the pigmentation symphony. MITF not only drives the expression of tyrosinase and related proteins, but also influences melanosome transport by regulating genes like RAB27A.
All right, guys. So in this episode, we are going to have a ton of genes that we mentioned, and I promise you, we are not dermatologists. So if you're a derm and you're listening to this, don't come at us if we mispronounce something. We are doing our best here. We are learning together, and I love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, Julie, this means that MITF doesn't just turn on pigment, it tells the melanocyte how to build, package, and deliver it. And that delivery is just as important. The pigment has to make its way from the melanocyte to neighboring keratinocytes, which are the cells that make up most of the epidermis.
Right. And that journey relies on motor proteins along with scaffolding proteins like melanophilin and RAB27A. These form a kind of rail system that moves melanosomes along the cytoskeleton and into the dendrites of the melanocyte.
And here's where it gets even more interesting. The shape and the dendricity of melanocytes, their little cellular arms, also determine how efficiently pigment is transferred. More dendrites mean that more melanin is getting passed along to surrounding skin cells.
This transfer step is essential because keratinocytes are what carry that pigment toward the skin surface as they mature. That's what creates the even or uneven tone that we see on the outside. So when we treat pigmentation disorders, we're not just trying to slow melanin production, we're also influencing how it's transferred and degraded.
And that's why depigmenting agents often target tyrosinase directly, like hydroquinone, kojic acid, or arbutin. But the more advanced treatments are looking at the entire melanogenesis pathway, including melanosome transfer and degradation.
Exactly. So think of it like this. Pigmentation is a full production line from gene to enzyme to packaging to shipping. And as professionals, we can step in at multiple points along that line with the right ingredients and therapies.
Okay, so here's where things get real. Sunlight isn't just a trigger for tanning, it's a direct biological command that tells your melanocytes to start working overtime. And it's not just UVB anymore. UVA and even visible light have been shown to affect melanin production in different and sometimes more persistent ways.
Exactly. Let's start with UVB. That's the one that causes sunburns and DNA damage in the skin cells. When UVB hits the skin, it damages DNA in the keratinocytes, which activates a stress response involving the P53 protein. And P53 isn't just fixing DNA, it's also triggering melanogenesis.
Right, P53 upregulates the production of POMC, which is a precursor for several key peptides, including alpha MSH and ACTH. These peptides bind to MC1R receptors on melanocytes, activating the C-AMP pathway, which leads to the activation of that MITF, that master regulator we talked about earlier. The C-CAMP, PKA, MITF pathway is critical for melanogenesis and is even altered in genetic pigmentation disorders like McCune-Albright syndrome and Carney complex.
And it doesn't stop at UVB. UVA penetrates deeper into the skin and generates oxidative stress, which also stimulates melanogenesis through a separate cascade involving prostaglandins and reactive oxygen species. And here's the twist. Visible light, especially blue violet light, has now been proven to trigger long-lasting hyperpigmentation, particularly in darker skin tones. Studies in Fitzpatrick skin types 4 through 6 show that visible light induces more intense and longer-lasting pigmentation than UVA alone.
What's wild is that melanocytes actually see blue light through a receptor called opsin-3, which triggers a calcium-dependent pathway that activates MITF again. This means that visible light isn't just bouncing off the skin, it's being received, processed, and turned into a pigment signal.
And that's a game changer for us in the treatment room. Traditional sunscreens often don't block visible light unless they contain iron oxides or tinted mineral pigments. So if your client has melasma, PIH, or acne scarring and you're not accounting for visible light, you're missing a big piece of the puzzle.
100%. We have to think beyond just SPF. Look for broad spectrum sunscreens that protect against UVA and UVB and include ingredients that filter visible light. These are especially critical for clients with deeper skin tones or chronic hyperpigmentation issues. Photoprotection strategies must include visible light and infrared protection, especially in melanocompetent individuals.
And don't forget about blue light exposure from devices. While the intensity is lower than sunlight, we're learning that chronic cumulative exposure might still contribute to pigmentation in sensitive individuals. So tell your clients if they're in front of a ring light or a laptop all day, tinted SPF is their best friend.
Bottom line, sunscreen changes everything because it's not just about getting a tan, it's activating complex hormonal and genetic pathways that can either protect the skin or cause long-term issues like hyperpigmentation, photoaging, and oxidative stress.
Let's talk about a question we get all the time in the treatment room. Why do some people tan beautifully while others just burn, freckle, or stay pale no matter what? It turns out the answer isn't how many melanocytes you have, but how they function.
That's right. Everyone, regardless of ethnicity or skin tone, has roughly the same number of melanocytes. The key difference are in the type, the amount, and the distribution of melanin those melanocytes produce. It's all about function, not quality.
For example, in individuals with darker skin tones like Fitzpatrick types 5 and 6, the melanocytes produce mostly eumelanin. This type of melanin is darker, more densely packed, and provides strong protection from UV damage. The melanosomes, the pigment granules, are larger, more mature, and more widely distributed into the upper layers of the skin, even reaching the stratum cornea.
In contrast, lighter skin tones tend to produce more pheomelanin, which is lighter in color and much less effective at protecting against UV radiation. And their melanosomes, they're smaller, degraded more quickly, and they don't make it as far into the outer layers of the skin. And that's why fair skinned individuals are more prone to sunburn and sun induced DNA damage, while deeper skin tones have natural photoprotection up to an SPF of 13 equivalent, according to some studies.
So when someone tans easily, it's usually because their melanocytes respond quickly and efficiently to UV exposure, ramping up eumelanin production and distributing it effectively. But if they burn, it means their skin isn't creating enough protective pigment in time, or it's making mostly pheomelanin, which doesn't help much.
And what's really interesting is that melanosome distribution also differs. In darker skin, the melanosomes are individually dispersed within keratinocytes, while in lighter skin, they tend to cluster, and that clustering affects how evenly pigment is seen across the surface, and it also impacts how long that pigment lasts.
That's why hyperpigmentation in deeper skin tones tends to be more persistent. The pigment is deposited deeper and lasts longer, which is why treatment plans need to be tailored differently. In deeper skin, we often need to be more cautious with aggressive treatments to avoid post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation.
Exactly, and this also explains why the same treatment, say a chemical peel or a laser, can behave completely differently across skin types. And it's not just about melanin production, it's how the pigment is stored, transferred, and broken down.
So the next time a client asks why their pigmentation issues linger longer or why they tan differently than a friend, you've got the answer. It's about melanin type, transport, and stability. Genetics play a major role, but so do things like hormonal status, inflammation, and even the health of their skin barrier.
which means personalized pigment management is essential, not just for results, but for skin safety. We're not just treating skin color, we're working with a dynamic biological system.
By now, we've made it pretty clear that melanocytes do a lot of the heavy lifting when it comes to skin pigmentation, but they don't work in isolation. In fact, a whole cast of supporting skin cells are constantly influencing how, when, and where pigment is produced.
Totally. Let's start with fibroblasts, which live in the dermis. These guys aren't just there to make collagen, they actually secrete signaling proteins that influence the melanocytes above them in the epidermis. One big player here is DKK1.
Yeah, DKK1 is fascinating. In areas like the palms and the soles, fibroblasts produce high levels of DKK1, which actively suppresses melanin production. That's one reason why the palms of your hands are lighter, even in people with darker skin. DKK1 blocks the WNT beta catenin signaling pathway, which normally stimulates melanin synthesis and melanocyte function.
So when we say pigment regulation is complex, this is what we mean. It's not just UV light or inflammation. Fibroblast derived factors like DKK1, SFRP2, and WIF1 can all upregulate or downregulate pigmentation depending on the location and the condition.
And then there's the vascular system, something we often overlook in pigmentation. But guess what? Melanocytes have receptors for endothelin 1, VEGF, prostaglandins, and nitric oxide, all of which are produced by endothelial cells in nearby blood vessels.
This becomes super relevant in conditions like melasma, where research shows increased vascularization in affected skin. The overactive vasculature may be releasing more endothelin 1, which stimulates melanogenesis and worsens pigment. Histological studies confirm that melasma lesions have more blood vessels and a higher expression of vascular markers.
It also explains why vascular targeted treatments like PDL, pulse dye lasers, and IPL, intense pulse light, sometimes help with melasma. They reduce that vascular stimulation. But we have to be cautious. In darker skin tones, these treatments can carry a higher risk of post-inflammatory hyperpigmentation.
Absolutely. And when you're dealing with melasma, the heat of those could also be triggering. Another interesting tool in our kit is tranexamic acid, which is a medication originally used for heavy bleeding. It has shown promise in treating melasma because it reduces endothelin 1 production, decreasing that overstimulation of the melanocytes. This is an oral medication, and studies show that oral tranexamic acid used off-label for 3 months can significantly reduce pigmentation through reoccurrence, though reoccurrence is common if treatment stops.
And it doesn't stop there. Recent research is even looking at sebocytes, the oil producing cells in the skin, and how they contribute to pigmentation by secreting inflammatory mediators that indirectly influence melanocyte behavior.
Not to mention that pollution and oxidative stress can also play a role. Diesel exhaust particles, for example, have been shown to increase melanin synthesis through mitochondrial dysfunction and inflammatory pathways. One 2021 study linked diesel exhaust particles to increase pigmentation and oxidative stress markers in melanocytes.
So when we talk about treating pigmentation, it's never just about suppressing melanin. It's about understanding and addressing all the underlying contributors. Fibroblasts, blood vessels, inflammation, hormonal triggers, oxidative stress, and even cell-to-cell communication.
Exactly. The skin is an ecosystem, and when one piece is off, whether that's inflammation from acne or a hormonal spike or microvascular activation, the melanocytes are going to respond. Our job is to treat the system, not just the symptom.
We've unpacked the science behind pigmentation, but now let's talk about how this actually shows up in real skin. Because pigment issues are everywhere. Melasma, post inflammatory hyperpigmentation, solar lentigo, and periocular darkening are just a few examples.
And according to the latest global data, over 50% of adults believe they're affected by some form of pigment disorder, especially in darker skin tones. That's a massive number, and the impact on the quality of life is just as big. For melasma and PIH, the Delkey scores, that's Dermatology Life Quality Index, often fall in the moderate to severe range. 40% of people with vitiligo and 35% with melasma report that pigmentation has a very or extremely large effect on their daily life.
Let's break down a few key conditions estheticians see all the time. For the rest of this month, we'll be breaking down these conditions further. First up, melasma. It's often triggered by a mix of UV exposure, visible light, heat, hormones, and vascular and fibroblast factors. It's not just pigment overload, it's a full system of dysregulation.
Then we have PIH, which is especially common after acne, waxing, or even overly aggressive peels or laser. Inflammation ramps up pigment production through cytokines, prostaglandins, and growth factors. And in deeper skin tones, the pigment settles deeper and sticks around longer.
And solar lentigens, those flat sunspots, are the visible legacy of cumulative sun damage. They're tightly linked to UV exposure and mitochondrial damage. They may not be harmful, but they're often the first thing clients want to fade.
Which brings us to an important point. Not all pigment needs to be erased. For many clients, our role isn't just to lighten skin, it's to even tone, boost resilience, and educate on prevention. And in many cases, total pigment suppression isn't the goal. It's about healthy regulation.
That means photoprotection is a non negotiable. We need to be recommending sunscreens that go beyond SPF. Look for products that protect against UVA, UVB, and visible light. Tinted mineral sunscreens with iron oxides are the gold standard for melasma and PIH.
And let's not forget about maintenance. Even when pigment fades, reoccurrence is common. Ongoing antioxidant use, gentle exfoliation, and continued barrier support are essential. Don't just fix it, fortify it.
This week's homework: do a pigment profile on 3 clients. Use your skin analysis tool or even your trained eye and document. 1. Where pigment is showing up. 2. What type you suspect: melasma, PIH, lentigo, etc. And 3. The possible triggers: sun, inflammation, hormones, etc.
Then match one topical intervention and one preventative strategy to that client. For example, pairing tranexamic acid with a tinted SPF or using azelaic acid alongside barrier repairing moisturizers. The goal is to think like a skin detective.
And if you're feeling really ambitious, review the ingredient labels of your favorite pigment products. Can you spot which ones target tyrosinase, which influence melanosome transfer, which offer visible light protection?
Today's deep dive proves that pigmentation is never just about color, it's about communication between cells, signals, and symptoms. It's hormonal, it's environmental, it's genetic, and it's responsive.
And for our clients, it's often emotional. So let's shift the conversation away from fixing flaws and toward restoring balance. Because when you understand the biology, you stop chasing lighteners and start creating real, lasting change.
That's all for today's episode. If you have any questions, send us a message on Instagram at STTraining.
And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. It helps more STs like you find our podcast. And as always, don't hesitate to educate.